Hi there, I'm John from CNCKing.com, and today we'll make a smaller version of a larger plaque we made earlier. The plaque here might look a little bit familiar. A couple of weeks ago we made a larger version of it, and this is like another gift to hand out. So it's the same logo, just different information here and here. Same wood, basically from the same board. So something you have to keep in mind when it comes to making custom wooden plaques is that number one, we're burning into it. So there's no paint filling or anything like that. The contrast that you see is actually caused by the laser itself, and it's the charcoal that's calling the color contrast. Now, something to keep in mind when we're doing that is that a logo might look perfectly fine at a very large scale, but when you bring it down to a smaller size, doesn't matter if it's router, laser, what have you, borders around things get smaller proportionally. What I mean by that is, let's say on a larger plaque, I'm just making up a number, the spacing, let's say, for this little thing here, which is kind of hard to see. There we go. So this here was maybe 1/8 of an inch on the larger plaque. And now that we're moving to a smaller plaque, well, that's not going to stay 1/8 of an inch. That's going to go down proportionally. So in this case here, it's 25% of what it was before. So as a result, everything gets a lot thinner. Now the challenge with wood, or basically any other material, even if this was chlorine, would have the same issue, is that when you have a very, very fine border in a very sort of, it's not really deep. Let's say maybe this is a little bit more than 1/16 to 1/8, depending on where you're looking at. That border ends up being very, very thin and very relatively deep. So as a result, this border is not very strong at all. There's almost like a sliver of material holding it there. Now the laser specifically can do that kind of work. That's not an issue because it never actually touches the material. If I try to do that with a router, it would just get ripped right off. You know, it just wouldn't last, just because there's pushing and pulling through the material. Well, with the laser, it's a non-contact method that's just burning its way through everywhere on the plaque, wherever it needed to be done. So that's something to keep in mind, because it might live or it might last the laser, but then with wood, you always have to finish it. You have to use sandpaper and stuff like that. And as soon as you do that, you're adding vibrations and stuff, and that's where you get a little bit of chipping and stuff like that happening. It's kind of hard to see. And you probably wouldn't notice it unless I pointed it out to you. But you can see like very thin borders would be an issue. So what's the easiest way to fix that? The easiest way to fix that is to actually go back to the logo and make things thicker on purpose. Therefore, you're creating more material. Another option is to go a little bit shallower with the laser. This is a little bit more of a challenge with the laser because the density of the wood is what decides how deep you go. So on a laminated board like this here, you might have one section of wood, let's say, even if it's the same board, even if it's right next to the other one, a little bit denser, and right next to it could be a spot that's a little bit less dense. So as a result of that, the laser will go less deep in the more dense and the opposite on the other side, which means that if you try to be very, very tricky with your calibrations, you might actually end up with an incomplete engraving, because it might look fine off the laser, then you got to do the sanding. Well, it's going to sand everything sort of roughly evenly, but you'll notice the different depths right away. So it's something to keep in mind. It actually took me quite a few years to get down to the point where I could laminate boards and it looks absolutely perfect. And a big part of that was actually getting a CNC router to do it properly. I have a manual planer in the shop and I do use it for projects, but nothing beats what you get out with a router. Now, the reason why the router is so good is because the bottom, the sacrificial board, is dead flat and parallel to the gantry. So that means when the router is going over it, it's exactly the dimension across the whole piece. Now that's very important because it means that right off the bat, whenever you produce something with it, it will be the same way. So all these little I call them sticks, all these sticks will be exactly dead flat, parallel, and identical in every way, routering wise or manufacturing wise. So that's why when you put glue and you put the seams together and you squish it together, everything's absolutely dead perfect. Now the problem with a wood planer doing it, and I have a good one, there's no way pushing wood through it you will ever get exactly the same pressure, the same angle, same everything. It doesn't matter how much you practice with it. I've tried it a ton of times, and the router just is a far superior wood planer than actually a wood planer. Now, the importance of that is because when you do the glue up and you have all these seams together, if they're exactly flat parallel to each other, you have you don't have a seam at all. Like the only reason you see that there is a seam is not because you see the seam, it's because you see the differences in the wood patterns or the textures, what have you, or the grain patterns in the wood. Otherwise, you'd have no idea that there was actually a laminated piece of board that you're looking at. You think it'd be one solid board. The advantage of doing that in the shop is that I can basically make any board of any size, any thickness that I need for projects. And that's come in really handy for making plaques like this. I also make molds. I've made a bunch of other woodworking projects where this capability just allows me to make something with endless flexibility with regard to wood species, size, thickness, what have you. Works awesome. So how do you go about getting a plaque like this made? The most straightforward way is to send us a design file of what you want with dimensions, because always, generally speaking, when I import a file, I don't know the dimensions. The computer might change the dimensions on me. So what you assume is, let's say 20 inches square, might import to me is 18.5 or what have you. And then if I do the project at that scale, it's different than the one you had. So generally a vector image as well. So a vector is a black and white image that's calculated based on math and not just a picture like you take on a photograph. So therefore you could zoom in indefinitely and everything's always sharp, especially the curves. And basically just tell us your timeline and what material you prefer to use, and we just go from there. So if you're looking for custom plaques, contact me at CNCKing.com. We'll make them for you and ship them right to your door.